Christian parenting.
Welcome to the Bible for Kids podcast with your hosts, best-selling children's author Amy Parker and author and co-creator of VeggieTales, Mike Nawrocki. If instilling biblical values in kids is important to you, this podcast will give you the resources, wisdom, and hope to do just that. Now, let's join our hosts, Amy and Mike, for this week's episode.
Welcome back to the Bible for Kids podcast. I'm Amy Parker.
And I'm Mike Nawrocki, and today is an exciting day on the podcast. We get to speak again with Wingfeather Saga creator Andrew Peterson, joined by co-author of the latest book in the series, Doug McKelvey. But before we chat with Andrew and Doug, we like to start every Bible for Kids podcast with a Bible verse. Amy?
Or in this instance, Bible verses. I have traveled on many long journeys. I have faced danger from rivers and from robbers. I have faced danger from my own people, the Jews, as well as from the Gentiles. I have faced danger in the cities, in the deserts, and on the seas. And I have faced danger from men who claim to be believers, but are not. I have worked hard and long, enduring many sleepless nights. I have been hungry and thirsty, and have often gone without food. I have shivered in the cold without enough clothing to keep me warm. Then, besides all this, I have the daily burden of my concern for all the churches. Who is weak without my feeling that weakness? Who is led astray, and I do not burn with anger? If I must boast, I would rather boast about the things that show how weak I am. 2 Corinthians 11:26-30 NLT.
Yeah, so we picked an adventurous Bible verse to to kind of go along with the epic fantasy adventure of the Wingfeather Saga.
Epically long, too.
Yeah, epically long. Good job. We all settled in with our pillows for that. That was awesome. So, well, let me introduce our first guest. Doug McKelvey participated in the early work of Charlie Peacock's Art House Foundation, an organization dedicated to a shared exploration of faith in the arts. In the decades since, he's worked as an author, song lyricist, scriptwriter, and video director. He's penned more than 350 lyrics recorded by a variety of artists, including Switchfoot, Kenny Rogers, Sanctus Real, and Jason Gray. And I also must add that he's a silly song co-writer, penning Pants with Ian Escalin. So let's see. To summarize, you might recall their pants if you're short and shorts if you're tall. It's one of my favorites.
Wonderful.
And then his newest book is as a contributing author on 7 thrilling stories from the World of Aerwiar in the Wingfeather Saga universe. His other works include Every Moment Holy from the Rabbit Room Press, The Angel Knew Papa and the Dog, the Wishes of the Kingfish, Subjects with Objects, and Stories We Shared, a family book journal.
Recording artist, songwriter, producer, filmmaker, publisher, and award-winning author of the Wingfeather Saga series, Andrew Peterson is also host of The Rabbit Room, which fosters Christ-centered community and spiritual formation through music, story, and art, and recently launched a film and TV production company, Shining Isle Productions, to produce an animated series based on his best-selling books. Known for songs like Is He Worthy, Be Kind to Yourself, The Reckoning, Don't You Want to Thank Someone, The Silence of God, Nothing to Say, You'll Find Your Way, and more. Peterson has also been named one of the foremost singer-songwriters around and has received multiple Best Album of the Year nods from critics, along with 2 Dove Award nominations. Taking his hits and fan favorites on the road, Peterson's touring draws capacity crowds at venues around the world, including several sold-out events at the historic Ryman Auditorium in Nashville.
All right. Welcome, you guys. Andrew and Doug, great to have you on the show.
So good to be here. So good to be here.
Well, and Andrew, it's great to have you back. You were with us pre-COVID, I think it was. You were in the radio studio with us. We were sitting all side by side, non-social distanced and all that.
Spitting on our mics and,
That's right.
Before we knew better.
Oh, man. But if you could just recap for our listeners, just a real quick intro about your background and how you got started with music and writing.
Sure. I grew up in this kind of straddling the Midwest and the South. I was 7 when we left Illinois and ended up in the deep south of North Florida. And I'm a pastor's kid and was a pretty much a nominal Christian until I was about 18 years old. I think I could have answered a lot of Bible-y answers about who Jesus was, but I didn't really know Jesus until I was about 18 or 19. And I ended up meeting him in some ways through the music of a guy named Rich Mullins. And I remember at the time I was trying to play music, trying to find my way in the world. And when I encountered that music, or really when I encountered Jesus through that music, I suddenly had this real passion to, as the psalmist says, proclaim the deeds of the Lord to the nations. And so I just wanted to tell everybody in the world how good the good news was. And I thought the best way to do that with my gifting was to write the kind of songs I write and eventually to write the kind of stories that I write. And so that's still, I think, the thesis statement of every concert I do is I just want people to know that Jesus is God and that he loves them. And I think, I come around it in different ways, whether it's through the Wingfeather Saga or through the nonfiction or through songs or whatever. But ultimately, that's what I want people to know.
Well, that's awesome. Well, and I when you say that you came into Christian music and were introduced through the music of Rich Mullins to Christ. I mean, you can kind of see that thread play through. I mean, he's for listeners who don't know Rich. I mean, he's sort of I don't know. He's such a poet, maybe the Bob Dylan of Christian music in a sense.
That's a way to put it. Yeah,
yeah. And it's just amazing to his work and his legacy, and that's fantastic.
And Doug, this is your first time on the show. Welcome.
Thank you.
My personal favorite of yours, I have to say, is Every Moment Holy, but I had no idea that you wrote songs and directed videos. So tell our listeners a little bit about your career so far and how you got started.
I came to Nashville to do volunteer work with the Art House Foundation, which was started by Charlie Peacock and his wife, Andy, in the early 90s. And that organization was created to be a shared exploration of Christian faith and the arts. And I had grown up as a kid who loved stories, so that was a very natural fit for me. And through working with people there, the invitation was extended actually by Charlie for me to try a songwriting experiment with him after I had been there a couple of years and he had seen various poetry that I had written and other things. And that was what launched my songwriting career. And I did that for about 12 or 15 years as my main vocation. And it was an odd time because after a few years of that, people, for the most part, quit buying music because of the MP3 technology that came along. And so I started looking at what other things I might do. And I started to dabble in screenwriting and making videos, and then eventually decided that I wanted to concentrate on writing books more than anything else. So, it's been kind of a meandering path, but I still dabble in all of those disciplines.
And so much of it transfers too, I feel like. I don't know that I've ever technically written a song, but I write verse pretty much all of my books, except for the one I'm currently working on. But, they're all verse in some sense. And so I feel like those skills are definitely transferable, and just description and communication in general. I feel like that's a skill that you develop over time, and regardless of how you communicate, the skill still applies.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that what I learned in the years of writing song lyrics was essential to what I have ended up doing with writing prayers for the Every Moment Holy books that you mentioned.
And those are just so gorgeous, and you write about the simplest things, and like how you can write something so beautiful about changing a diaper, I don't know, but they're really stunning and exactly what you need. It's been a long time since I've changed diapers, but
I was going to ask Amy, how long?
Yeah. But but that sticks out at me as one of the things in the table of contents is, it's just in those moments that you don't think of as being holy at all. You find holiness in that. And I think that's just beautiful. And, that's in a way what Jesus did too. He found holiness where there was none. He brought holiness, I think. But anyway, that skill certainly resonates throughout every moment holy.
So I have a question, and this is for both of you. How did you meet and start working together? And can you tell us maybe a little bit about your friendship in the Rabbit Room?
Yeah. Well, I was, so every time there's a new album that comes out, the label sets you up with they write a new bio. So they hire a writer to, sit down with you, have coffee, do an interview, and ask you some questions so that they can craft a biography that's just used for press and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, I forget who, Steve Ford, maybe one of the guys at the label was like, right. Hey, there's this guy, Doug McKelvey. I think we should try, something a little different. He's a pretty unique dude. I think you'll really like him. And so we met at a Starbucks in Cool Springs. And I think we barely talked about my new record at the time. And Doug, I remember as soon as I found out that he was a writer and that he was working on a sci-fi novel, I was like, I'm working on a fantasy novel. And we ended up talking for I think 2 hours or something. And
I think it was at least 2 hours.
And I think when we got home, I remember when I got home, I called my brother and I talked to my wife and I was like, I just met the coolest guy and I just hope we're friends for a long time. And I think that you came home and told your wife, I just met the weirdest, most annoying guy. And I hope
that wasn't true. Actually, I went home and my wife, Lisa, said, how did it go? And I said, I think we just became friends.
It was true. It was like there was this really quick affinity for the same things, and I just really admired him and what he did. And so the bio, and as an aside,
and you broke scone together.
Yeah, we did. We broke scone. I remember that the bio that you wrote, I felt like was like the one that I felt like got me better than anybody had ever done before. Like it became the thing that people would use in their intro. He may have written some of what you just read, Amy. I don't know. But more than that, I just felt like, there was this real sense of kinship. And that was probably 10 years ago, 12 years ago. It was a while ago. Doesn't matter.
I think it was more than 10, probably. I'm trying to remember. I think you had 2 of the Wingfeather books out and we're working on the 3rd.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah. So it's been a hot minute since we met, but man, I'm so thankful. And Doug has, like you were saying, Amy, every moment holy, I just think is one of the most, magnificent. Might sound like I'm overstating, but I just really think it's one of the great gifts to the church. And volume 2 just came out about death, grief, and hope, and it's all liturgies about seasons of dying and grieving, but also the hope of the resurrection. And I couldn't be prouder. We talk about Doug in the Rabbit Room, like when he's not around, we talk about him and I'm going to embarrass you. I'm sorry, Doug, but we're just like, I'm pretty sure that in 100 years, nobody's going to know any of my music, but I bet they'll all be reading Every Moment Holy.
Well, we're gonna. I don't know where to.
Not even going to comment on that.
I was waiting for Doug to start crying or something. But we're gonna.
You're supposed to say.
I missed it up a little.
But why don't we do this? We'll give you a moment to collect yourself, and we'll take a break, and we'll be right back on the Bible for Kids podcast. My Arms Will Hold You Tight. A whimsical board book from mother-daughter writing duo Crystal Bowman and Terry McKinley is filled with masterful rhymes and beloved animals, including llamas, elephants, sloths, and fun surprises like bats and flamingos, that brings the tenderness of heartfelt love between baby animals and their parents to life. A perfect gift, this book will appeal to the whole family and is sure to be a favorite book of mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, and other caregivers to read to their precious little ones. My Arms Will Hold You Tight is available now wherever books are sold.
From the creators of the 1 Year Daily Acts of Friendship comes 100 Daily Acts of Friendship for Girls. Strong, healthy friendships offer a safe place for girls to be themselves and share their deepest feelings. But how do they build lasting friendships? One of the key ingredients to having good friends is learning to be a good friend. Designed for girls 8 to 12, 100 Daily Acts of Friendship for Girls teaches what God says about friendship and will give them practical, everyday tips for developing lifelong relationships. Each devotion includes a scripture verse, a short story about friendship, questions to ponder, and a daily act of friendship section with ideas for living out what they have learned. Girls will not only learn how to develop godly friendships with others, but will discover how to be friends with Jesus, the friend who will never disappoint and will always stand beside them. 100 Daily Acts of Friendship for Girls is available wherever books are sold.
With the tenderness of a mother speaking directly to her child, best-selling author Karen Kingsbury uses her heartwarming book, Let Me Hold You Longer, to remind us that the years of childhood fly too quickly by us. Most of us faithfully remember and capture our children's firsts. Karen encourages readers to try to recognize and savor the often fleeting lasts, the last days of kindergarten and last at-bats in Little League amid the whirlwind of life. This poignant reminder has taken on a whole different meaning as families have adapted to quickly changing circumstances in a pandemic and in some cases, let go of everyday routines while experiencing many unexpected lasts. This book makes a perfect gift for baby showers, new moms, seasoned moms, recent graduates, and anyone else who needs a reminder to savor the last moments of childhood. Let Me Hold You Longer is available wherever books are sold. Welcome back to the Bible for Kids podcast, and Amy and I are speaking with Andrew Peterson and Doug McKelvey.
So we are going to dive into the Wingfeather world. So Andrew, can you give our listeners a quick primer for the Wingfeather Saga for those who may not be aware somehow? And what's just like the elevator pitch of the world of Wingfeather and Aewiar?
Oh man. So you would think that by now I would have come up with an elevator pitch. These books have like really turned out to be tricky. We have this friend named Sam Smith. He publishes under SD Smith, and he has this like wildly successful series called The Green Ember. And his whole pitch is rabbits with swords. That's like all you need to know. It's a rabbit characters and it's fantasy. And I'm so jealous. Every time I see that hashtag, I'm like, if only mine would, there aren't enough. It's too complicated of a thing. Anyway, so all that to say, it focuses on a family, 3 kids living in a place called Aewiar. And the story opens up 9 years after the end of the Great War, in which the good guys lost. And so the kids are growing up in a little town on the edge of the dark sea of darkness, and the town is occupied by this force called the Fangs of Dang, and that's how the story opens. And over the course of 4 books, Janner, Kalmar, and Lili, these 3 siblings, discover that they are at the center of a great mystery that could possibly save the world, or at least change it. And so it's this huge adventure story. I wanted to know what it was like to write a big epic fantasy, and when I first started working on it, my kids were young enough to where I was really wanting them to think I was cool. You know, that's half the
work out.
It actually worked. Surprisingly, it actually worked. But so the kids are based loosely on my own children, and the story starts kind of small. Everything happens in this town, kind of like the Shire, and over the course of the next 4 books, they keep, the world expands, and so do the stakes. The stakes get higher, and it ends up being this big thing. So it starts off a little bit. I usually describe it as the Lord of the Rings meets the Princess Bride. So it's a big epic story, but there is enough like Monty Python kind of weirdness in the world to where it's entertaining in that way. I don't know how to talk about it. I'm just so thankful that I got to write the books. And
that's great. Well, if we were like going up the Sears Tower or something in the elevators, that would have been a great elevator pitch.
Yeah, they would have just like pushed the next floor and gotten off.
No, that's
what
awesome.
About a war with feathers. How about that?
No.
No. Okay.
All right, war with that. Yeah, no. It's dry though.
Yeah, if you. Yeah. I just think of like the Lord of the Rings. It's like a hobbit with fuzzy feet wants to drop a ring in a volcano. I don't know. It's just like that's.
How do you do an elevator pitch for that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
My elevator pitch for it would just be to say that my youngest daughter read all 4 books 3 times and then insisted on reading them aloud to my wife because she couldn't stand the fact that my wife hadn't read them yet.
That's all you
awesome.
Need to say.
Yeah. I love that. Well, so you mentioned that, Andrew, that you wrote them, to impress your kids that, you were into epic fantasy, but, when did you come up with the idea for them? And then how long did the 4 books take to write?
The whole thing took about 10 years to write. I was, when I think back to working on the books, the picture that pops into my head first is me on a tour bus on the Behold the Lamb of God Christmas tour. While everybody else was like playing kickball in the church field, I was inside with the computer trying to figure out what chapter 27 was going to be because I had a deadline. And so I was like doing a record and then a book and then a record and then a book and then touring in between it all. And it was a season that was unsustainable over the long haul. But I just had this real passion. I like, as a parent who we love to read aloud at home, and we realized pretty quickly that there weren't a whole lot of books that were well suited for it, right? Yeah. And not a whole lot of books where I really trusted the author with my children's hearts and their imaginations. Right. And so, as a believer in Jesus, I was just like, there have to be stories out there. Somebody's got to be writing stories out there that aren't gonna, I don't know, have these little inception seeds planted that aren't going to be edifying or whatever. And the thing is, you don't have to like wimp out and write a really didactic, safe story to write a Christian story. You know what I mean? Like, right. Like there's scripture, first of all, but lots of stories have plenty of peril and intrigue and adventure and all that kind of stuff. And the stakes are as high as they can possibly be. Yeah. And in a sense, a Christian knows that better than anybody. And so I just was determined to try to write not a Christian story, not an overtly Christian story, but a deeply Christian story. Right. And so, yeah, it took a while. It was a hard sell to the publisher, like I think Doug knows this feeling, but in the world we live in, there's this middle space that so many of us occupy where we're like not Christian enough for the Christian industry, but if the mainstream industry gets a whiff of the fact that you believe in the bodily resurrection of Jesus, then they might kind of be wary of you. They might think that you're doing some kind of like agenda driven thing. So anyway, so we're in this weird middle space, but that's the best place to be. Like I think it's just such a fun, exciting place to be from a storytelling standpoint and a music standpoint. I'm not answering your question. I just realized. No,
you are absolutely doing a great job.
That's kind of where it came from. I honestly sat down and I wanted to write the story that 12-year-old Andrew would have geeked out about.
Yeah.
And I just kept thinking, like, what would I most want to happen? Oh, what if there were these walking wolves? Oh man, what if there was a dragon that showed up here? So it was like, that undergirded with what little I know of how story works. And I love stories. And so,
well, I can't think, at that age, at 12, I can't think of anything I enjoyed more than epic fantasy, Lord of the Rings and Hobbit and, Sword of Shannara and Doon.
Oh,
I ate up all of those books and I just, absolutely loved them. And to have, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say my copy of of the Sword of Shannara is right over there.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, I've got it.
Oh man. And it's so funny. I went back and I read a part of that, as an adult. And I was like, it's not as good as Tolkien. So as a 12-year-old, it was great.
Yeah.
So it's awesome.
I was going to say that like I thought I was finished with the Wingfeather Saga. Like the books were done, and I kind of crossed the finish line and was so satisfied and so happy. And then comes Wingfeather Tales. So I'm segueing to Doug, because that turned out to be this incredible surprise. So I don't know if you guys did I cue you up for a good question for Doug?
Well, yes. We do have that question. Amy was going to ask one more, and then we're going to go right to that one. If that's
sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, no. I mean, whatever works. We're casual.
Yeah. Well, if we could go right into that, and I'll just ask, just in general, this whole idea of the Wingfeather literary universe. So as I was looking at the book, I thought, okay, well, is this your Silmarillion, or is it more like your Ballad of Buster Scruggs?
We'll talk about the Ballad of Buster Scruggs on here.
Yeah, what's the so what's the take? Is this a whole backstory, or is it just like vignettes, within this world?
Yeah, for Wingfeather Tales, it's the Ballad of Buster Scruggs is a great reference, actually, because it's all standalone stories in this world that it happened because we were kickstarting book 4, and like the first 2 were with a publisher, the second 2 were with Rabbit Room Press, because long story, but I couldn't find a publisher to publish the second 2 books of the thing, and since then, Random House has picked them up, and they're all in one place now. But at the time, I was like, well, this is my last book, and I just want it to go out with a bang. What if we were to kickstart it and publish a hardcover with lots of illustrations? And so we hit our goal pretty quickly, which was amazing. But then we were like, what else could we do as a stretch goal? And I think my brother was like, what if we just asked a bunch of authors in the Rabbit Room community to contribute stories that were in world, right? Yeah, and we'd just call it Wingfeather Tales. And I was like, okay, that sounds great. We'll worry about it later. And then, of course, with Kickstarter, a year goes by and you're like, oh, we promised this thing.
Yeah, dang it.
So we went around the horn and invited Jonathan Rogers and Indy Wilson and Jennifer Trafton and Pete Peterson, Jonathan Rogers. I already said that, didn't I? Who else? Jay Myers, and then finally Doug McKelvey.
Well, and let's cue Doug. So, Doug, tell us about how you became involved in where your story, kind of formulated for you.
So, when the idea was first pitched to the various authors, we were allowed to comb through the books and find a particular character or an incident that was referenced. Could have been something that happened long before the incidents in the Wingfeather Saga began. And for me, as a father of 3 daughters, I opened the first book. I had read all of them that Andrew had written up to that point. And I saw a particular reference early in the book. I don't want to give any spoilers here. But there were parents who, suffered a great tragedy. Their daughter had been taken from them. And in Andrew's story, it was kind of an aside, because it was through the eyes of one of the main characters who had just heard about this incident happening. But there was something about that I just immediately seized on. And as a father of 3 daughters, I wanted to know what that man's journey was after that had happened. And I've joked that it was a mistake to launch into a story with only that as a starting point and not having an outline, not knowing how it would resolve. But it really wasn't a mistake. It just meant that I had to be very committed to see that story through to the end.
And you had to discover it on your own, right? In the midst of it.
Right. It very much was a process. As an author, I was journeying along beside this character, and there were a couple of things that I had in mind from the beginning. That okay, at some point he'll reach this place in the story and this will happen. And then very unexpectedly, those those things changed, and the character began to make choices that I hadn't considered right in the moment when I'm writing a scene that I've been building up to.
Yeah.
He doesn't make the choice that I expected him to make. He does something completely different.
Yeah.
And that's when writing fiction becomes really exciting to me in the process, is when suddenly the story takes off on its own and the characters are doing things I didn't anticipate, and I feel like I'm just chasing them,
Right.
trying to keep up, trying to write as fast as I can to keep track of what they're doing. So the assignment, the invitation was to write a short story, and I wasn't able to stay within those confines, but Andrew was gracious enough to publish a story that was about 6 times longer than it was supposed to be.
I love it. Oh man. Well, we're going to take a short break and we'll be right back on the Bible for Kids podcast. Kids have a lot of questions about God, faith, and the Bible. Why did Jesus come to earth? Who wrote the Bible? What is faith? If you're looking for a great resource to answer some of kids' toughest questions, check out The Big Book of Bible Questions by best-selling author Amy Parker and apologist Doug Powell. With sound theology in kid-friendly terms, Amy and Doug tackle 60 questions covering the Old and New Testaments. The vibrant, playful pictures bring each answer to life and make this book even more fun for kids to read on their own. Plus, you'll love having this book at your fingertips during your family devotions or for those moments when you might need some help with answering your child's questions. The Big Book of Bible Questions is available now from your favorite bookseller.
The Bible for Kids podcast is part of the Christian Parenting Podcast Network, which we like to say has a podcast for every parent. But reaching over 500,000 moms and dads with trusted biblical guidance every month comes with a cost, which is why we hope you'll give a donation. Please give generously today by texting CPGIVE to 474747. That's CPGIVE to 474747. You can also give by visiting CPGive, that's CPGIVE.org. Christian Parenting is 100% donor funded and relies on listeners like you to support the future creation of parenting resources. So please give your donation before time runs out to keep the Bible for Kids podcast and Christian Parenting going strong. Welcome back to the Bible for Kids podcast. We are speaking with Andrew Peterson and Doug McKelvey.
So you guys mentioned some of the other authors that you work with, did you all kind of talk about your stories together before you went off and wrote, or was it just like everybody just picked something on their own and then kind of threw it in the mix? How did that process work with coordinating ideas and concepts around this world?
Well, I think everybody checked in with me at some point and just kind of said, "Hey, I'm thinking about writing about this. Is that cool with you?" But that was all it was. There was no like approval of outlines or, I just know that my brother really wanted to write a story about Podo, the young sea pirate, and that was kind of it. I was like, go for it. So I remember when I got the stories one at a time, they began trickling into me. And I was reading them partly to edit them, quote unquote, but also just kind of make sure that they all fit coherently into the world and there weren't any rules of the world that they broke. But man, it was like one of the most moving, this is going to sound like I'm just speaking in hyperbole, but one of the most moving experiences as an author that I can imagine, which in the intro to the book, I describe it like this, that I was like, imagine if I had built a house, I designed the house, I drew up the architectural plans, the schematic, I built it, I hammered every nail, and then I invited all my author friends over to the house for a dinner, and then one by one, they started showing me secret passageways that I didn't know were there, right? That's how it felt. It was like Doug was like, "Hey, did you notice that behind this painting there's a knob that you can turn that makes this wall fall away?" So that's what I felt like the whole time. I was like, "Oh, there's this whole chamber of the Wingfeather world that I didn't know existed," and it was just unbelievable. So and for Doug's story, which was I think 60,000 words, Is that right? Which the first Wingfeather book was only 84 or something. So he almost was longer than my first book with this quote unquote short story. But it was like staggering to read. Like it reads like Cormac McCarthy, but it's a fantasy novel, but it's a Western, and it's about this like little nugget of kind of a footnote in book one, and it expands into this. It's literally called The Places Beyond the Maps, because in the Wingfeather world, the assumption is that, you know, there are places beyond the edges of what is known, and we just don't know what's out there. Nobody's ever explored and come back, and that's where Doug decided to go. And so it was just a blast to read. But all the stories are that way. They were just so, yeah, just fun little. It's kind of like when you're watching like Magnum PI as a kid, and there'd be like a little side episode about TJ. That was a really obscure reference, and I'm so sorry.
Just watch those with my older
couldn't you do something less obscure like BJ and the Bear or something?
Yeah, okay. Sure, yeah.
Oh, I forgot about BJ and the Bear.
Anyway, it was just a blast to do. And you know, each person's story reflected that person's writing style so well, and who they were. You could, like, a counselor would have a ball getting to the bottom of why.
I was almost thinking I love your description better than what I was thinking at first, because I was thinking, you know, when you watch the Kennedy Center honors, you know, like when they honor, you know, a singer, and then all the other singers get up and perform their material, you know. But that's a little different because they're kind of, you know, but your secret passageway is great because they're introducing new ideas and new stories and new songs into it. So
I get so excited talking about this, and I'm sorry, Doug, I don't want to like steamroller over you, but we're making an animated series out of the Wingfeather Saga. I'm so excited about it. We funded it a couple weeks ago, and so last week was the writing retreat. So we had Doug and these other 4 writers from LA come out, stay in Nashville for a week, and just hammer out season 1. And at the end of the day, at Friday afternoon when they'd finished, I went and they pitched the whole thing to me. So episode 1, this happens and this happens and this happens. And they kind of go down the thing, break it all down. And I was moved, you know, I was like, I couldn't believe that I was almost crying by the end of it, because I could so picture like this same story, but it's in a visual form. And like, it's interesting because people have asked, like, most of the time the author doesn't get much say at this point, you know. Most of the time an author would sell the rights, and then some production company would go take the story and do what they wanted. But I kind of insisted on being in the room, and people have been like, is it weird for people to monkey with your story and like move stuff around? And it's like, oh no, you have no idea. It's just the best thing, because what it feels like is that they are moving the story closer to its like purest form. So I had my version of the story and these characters, and then there's this new visual angle, and like the combination of the two moves the story further out of my mind and into the its most like platonic version of it. You know what I mean? Yeah. The bare essentials of what the story really is. And so you like collaboration ends up augmenting the thing, and it doesn't diminish it, almost never. And so it's been fun.
Yeah. And I love that because I found that to be true. You have an intention when you write in a way that's going to communicate with others. But a lot of times, you know, I found that, that's not exactly what I was looking to communicate. But when you're working collaboratively, you can kind of get, you know, those people to add to that, and you know that meaning comes through, and it's plus. You know, so
and they are the ones that they help you know what you were trying to communicate. You may think you know what you want to communicate, but then they know better because they see you better, and they see the story because it's now about the story and not the author of the story. You know?
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Yeah, it's great.
Very, very cool.
And tell us about, either one of you, tell us about the illustrations in this book. We understand it contains the first ever Wingfeather comic.
Oh, yes, it does. So, Jay, grew up on comic books too. I think we would have been friends, Mike. Like if you were reading fantasy novels, you were probably reading Batman comics. But yeah, there's a guy named Jay Myers, a wonderful artist who I got to try my hand at writing an actual comic script that he then illustrated. And it's a really short side story about a couple of the characters in the story, which is pretty fun. One of my favorite things about the book is the illustrations, because it's got a lot of really great illustrators pitched in, kind of like the authors pitched in. But Doug McKelvey's story was illustrated by none other than my son, Aedan Peterson.
Oh, wow.
He was 16, maybe 17 when he did the first edition of the book. And now Aedan is married and he's a college grad and he's like working in animation.
He was in my class and he was a fan, and he's actually married to another student of mine. So
That's right.
They're a power creative couple. They're both brilliant. So,
they are, yes. And so when Aedan knew that we were republishing this book, he was like, "Can I please redraw all of the drawings for?" So he like updated
now that
them.
I've been in Mike's class.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, it's wonderful.
Oh, that is so cool.
One thing that I wanted to talk about, I think we still have a little bit of time. Something that you did through the pandemic. We hear all of these, and rightly so. Horrible things that happened through the pandemic, and everybody got to stay home and ran out of toilet paper and all that good stuff. But I loved to see how people got creative during the pandemic and brought something unique and beautiful to the world that wouldn't have happened otherwise. And you did one of those things. So throughout 2020, you did live readings of the Wingfeather Saga on social media, and you were there like every night. And you had a pretty enthusiastic response to that. So tell us what that process meant to you. Tell us about some of the feedback you've had from readers and those who participated in the live readings.
Well, I remember we were in the UK on tour in March of 2020 when lockdown happened, and it was so sad because it was shaping up to be just the best tour. Like we were literally about to take a ferry to Northern Ireland to cross the Irish Sea and play for the Irish, and then ferry back to Wales. It was just like this epic journey with me in the band.
I heard the flute going.
Yeah, man. I was wearing a kilt. It was amazing. But no, we were like 5 shows into the tour when, there were, I got a call from my manager that said, if you don't get home in 48 hours, you might be stuck there indefinitely. And so, of course, none of us knew, right? And so we had to just cancel everything and get home. And that happened to also be the week of the re-release of book 1 of the Wingfeather Saga by Penguin Random House, which was a huge deal. And it just got overshadowed by this tidal wave of COVID, right? And I was having flashbacks to early in my career. My second record came out on 9/11.
Oh, wow.
And, it's this complicated thing where you're like, people are suffering. I don't want to complain. But man, of all the days that this thing that I worked on could release, this is the worst, and I was like, oh, not again. I can't believe that there's this like global thing. People are suffering and dying. And in the middle of it, there's this thing that I was working on. So all that to say, it was like turned out to be this huge blessing, because in the middle of all that darkness, literal darkness, because it was spring, or late winter, and everybody was stuck at home. Everybody was scared and nervous. I was just like, man, I don't know what else to do. I'll just start reading the stories. And I think the first night there were like 99,000 viewers reading along. Yeah. And it ended up whittling its way down to an average of like 20 some odd thousand a night. Families, like not just people, but families. And like, I cried. Like I remember we were just so moved by the fact that this was just something that was kind of fun, that became meaningful because people were stuck, Yeah. I hadn't really thought it through what it would mean. I just was like, well, I'm stuck too. This is a fun idea, and just did it. And it ended up kind of like I think more people know about the Wingfeather Saga because of it than any marketing plan anybody could have come up with, And so it's been really cool, like to get emails from people in Canada and stuff where they were way more locked down than we were, saying that was one of the things that they could look forward to every day. And so I just couldn't be more grateful. I was a mess. And, the last day of the last reading of the last book was the day that we got the call that Angel Studios wanted to pick up the Wingfeather Saga as an anime.
Oh man. Wow.
Yeah, it was an amazing journey.
That is so cool.
And if you just think about, like, that takes you back to, let me just be clear here that I did not do this in my childhood, but when you see families gathered around the radio or I guess even the TV, but you're reading, so it's more of a radio kind of thing, but everybody's gathered around reading together. That just, I think all of us got back to something simpler throughout the pandemic, and that is one way that I think that was so beautifully done.
Yeah, well, it's just is a testimony to me about how much our hearts need stories.
Yeah.
Like they ground it's a way to like push back at the darkness. You kind of like each of those homes with this little bubble of light underneath this big dome of darkness, right? And they were reminding each other, whether it was my book or whatever story they were reading, of what was true, you know. And so yeah, it fires me up. It gets me so excited about the ministry of the Rabbit Room, about the books that Doug is writing, and how important it is that our hearts are trained in the battle against despair. And stories are one of our best weapons.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent closing. What do you think, Mike?
I think so. I can't think of a better way to top it off. So Andrew, Doug, thank you so much for being on the show, for telling us a little bit about 7 thrilling stories from the world of Aewiar. And can you tell our listeners how they can connect with you and find out more about your music and your books?
Yeah, for me, it's andrew-peterson.com or just go to rabbitroom.com. Yep. And Doug?
Yeah, DougMcKelvey.com will just take you to the Rabbit Room website where it has various things that I've written all in one place there.
Fantastic.
Listeners, we are always giving away free stuff on our socials, so go follow us on Instagram or Facebook at The Bible for Kids, or on our website, thebibleforkids.com. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Bible for Kids podcast with Amy Parker and Mike Naraki. Be sure to connect with The Bible for Kids on Instagram, Facebook, and at thebibleforkids.com. The Bible for Kids podcast is powered by the Christian Parenting Podcast Network. Find out more at christianparenting.org. Our show is also available on waynation.com.
Christian Parenting.